Hi, so I'm going to show you my audience. Oops, there we go.
Hi.
All right. Stand here.
Lily, back up.
So hi everybody, my name is Catherine Mackla. Today I'm going to be talking about something I'm very passionate about, as I've been studying criminology for years now. It's prison reform, which is a very important topic in our society because it impacts families and it impacts our community and our taxpayers. So I want to talk about that today, and yeah. So a startling fact about that is between 1970 and 2010, more people were incarcerated in the United States than in any other country in the entire world. So you think about all the countries in the world that incarcerate people for punishment, that's a lot. And the rates haven't really improved, actually, at all. Some people suspect it's getting worse, although there's no one statistic. A majority of people that are incarcerated are people of low social economic status and people of color, which is a topic of discussion in many political debates. Approximately 698 of every 100,000 people incarcerated are in there for drug offenses, petty crimes, property crimes, small crimes, and they're in there with violent offenders. Actually, the United States makes up 22% of the prison population in the entire world, which is a lot, which is about a couple 100 million. Due to these high incarceration rates, overcrowding within the prisons is tremendously becoming a problem. Overcrowding can lead to detrimental living conditions for the offenders, and also it can be a burden on society and taxpayers. It's a big financial strain on the system. Overcrowding also leads to such occurrences as sexual assault and violence by those frustrated offenders who feel like they're being locked up like they are animals. That's how they feel in a lot of interviews, they say. Often putting people in prison for non-violent offenses puts them in harm's way by locking them up with violent offenders. They might turn to joining a gang for protection, which leads to even more violence. So does mass incarceration actually work, since we use it as our main form of punishment? It's a good question a lot of people ask, and it's a big topic in political discussions as well as educational settings. Studies say it actually does more harm than it does good because our society appears to put focus on punishment rather than rehabilitation and treatment. Mass incarceration does not appear to have any effect on recidivism rates. Recidivism is basically a term used in criminology to describe the tendency to reoffend by an offender. In fact, within 3 years of release, about 2/3 of offenders reoffend. And in about 5, about 3/4, which is about 70%. The screen went black on me. All right, sorry about that. So a lot of people are arguing that focusing on treatment rather than punishment can do a world of good for the system as a whole and as for these offenders. Some alternative routes would be support and treatment for drug offenders and those with mental illness, because we don't really put their focus on their bettering and their treatment. According to the ACLU, spending more money on healthcare, education, housing, and job programs, and less on incarceration can have a big impact. And in order to change behavior, an individual must change their toxic behaviors. Otherwise, incarceration is just going to be a temporary solution to a very big problem. I agree with this notion because I believe that change comes from within an individual. And in order to fully change your behaviors, you have to get the treatment that you need. And sometimes just being locked up doesn't really do that for you. In conclusion, I think these big changes should be made. And I continue to advocate against mass incarceration in my studies and as I move forward in my career. The U.S. could afford to be a little bit more empathetic to offenders and seek treatment above all else instead of punishment, because it doesn't appear to be doing much good. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me talk.
Good job. Good job.